give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analyst. My name is Corey Tulliva, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Albert Garbage Time Gim. You're watching the NBA Draft Show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed. Albert, my man, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Really excited. It feels great. Like we're back in the flow, right? It's great to hear Leonardo DiCaprio's voice and Matthew McConaughey, because that means we're back and we're doing what we love to do, Corey. So I'm excited. And especially with the two guys we're talking about today, I think we're going to have a very spicy conversation. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm very interested in both of these guys, and I don't want to spoil too much, but I left higher on both of them again after doing my deep dive again. So we're going to break down Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma and Jase Richardson from Michigan State today. Two of the more dynamic guards, potential lottery picks in the 2025 NBA draft. And we are going to start with Jeremiah Fears. So Jeremiah Fears is listed at 6'4", 182 pounds via the Oklahoma website. He will be 18.7 years old on draft night. One of the younger players in this class. He was a reclass freshman, so I guess should be in high school. Averaged 17.1 points, 4.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 3.4 turnovers, 0.1 blocks, 1.6 steals on 43, 28, 85 splits, 56.2% true shooting, 48% effective field goal, 5.9 BPM. Now I'm going to throw a little Bart Torvik query at you. I know, I just wrote a piece for NoCeilingsNBA.com last week on, how to use Bart Torvik without cooking the books. This big, piece looking for undervalued players, without kind of cooking the books and searching for ways to make players look better. But that's exactly what I did here. I wanted to cook the books a little bit. And so guards who are freshmen and sophomore with a 30 or better usage, 55% true shooting or greater, 25% assist, 2% steal, 5 threes per 100 possessions, and 80% at the free throw line with a 40% free throw rate. We have Jeremiah Fears, Trae Young, Ja Morant, Scottie Pippen Jr., and Cooper Flagg. Okay, that's the list there. So yes, maybe I cooked the books a little bit, but that is a very interesting list of players for him. And I want us to switch things up a little bit, Albert, and instead of doing our player comp at the end for Jeremiah, I wanted to maybe start it out at the beginning for this episode because of that Bart Torvik query, because I think there is a name there that is a potential low end comp for him. So if you were trying to come up with a comp for Mr. Fears, who are some names that maybe you thought about?
So my three comps that I have for Fears, not based on numbers. This is based on how I view these players stylistically. And of course, as always, never a one for one. I was just thinking bits and pieces of these high, medium, and low outcomes of these three guys could be who we're looking at with Jeremiah Fears. So, Corey, as you talk about prospect chemistry, is definitely a part of this when I give you my three guys. So, low end, and of course, he doesn't have the same defensive stuff at all. But low end, I thought of a guy like Devin Harris. Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
So,
all-star.
Yeah. Correct. Interestingly enough, all three guys that I picked are all-stars. So different types of all-stars, okay? Low end, Devin Harris. Mid outcome, Jeff Teague.
I like that one.
High end, Stephon Marbury. So okay. I'm thinking
all retired.
awfully tired. I apologize, but I am what I am, right, Corey? I will not stop being me. But I like the '90s, 2000s, whatever guys. But I'm thinking like a mix of these three guys was kind of where my head went with Jeremiah Fears. As you mentioned, right? All three were all-stars, all three productive, strong NBA careers. And once again, it's not a one-for-one, but I'm feeling bits
Of
and
course.
pieces of all three. But I feel like the kind of connecting piece between the three guys is speed. That's where my head was at with Jeremiah Fears. He's such a fast guard. So I thought of those three guys is kind of where I landed.
I love the Devin Harris and I love the Jeff T. I think those are both incredibly accurate, really, really strong. And I think maybe even better. Definitely, I think better. I like them better than some of mine. But when that Bart query came up and I saw the name Scottie Pippen Jr., I think to me, for a low end comp, I look at Scottie Pippen Jr., who was older. He was a 3-year guy at Vandy, right? And he was, I think, 20-point per game scorer his sophomore and junior year. So he was one of these volume scorers who started out his career a little inefficient, like wasn't necessarily like a strong 3-point shooter, but has transitioned. But like his shot always looked good, just took a lot of tough ones. And now he's in the league and, he shot almost 40% this year and has carved, it took a while, but he carved out a role. Now, again, like I think that Jeremiah Fears his age, he's going to be a one and done. I think the, potential with him is a little bit higher than Scottie Pippen Jr., but I think as a low end comp, like I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting name that came out of this Bart Torvik query. Some other guys, Trey Mann, I think, when we'll talk about like kind of the creative handle and like the suddenness and violence of some of his dribble moves, I thought was really interesting. And then I think like high end, if the shot really came around, Darius Garland is a name that for like an absolute high end with a creative handle, off the bounce shot maker, and with some playmaking potential. So those are my names, but Devin Harris and Jeff Teague are really interesting.
I appreciate that, Corey. I as always, I like to mix in some of the older guys, but the biggest thing for me, once again, with Jeremiah and Corey, to your point and what you were saying, there are some very distinct strengths with Jeremiah that help you to connect him with some other guys that have played in the league. And of course, there are also some holes, right? Red flags or yellow flags or whatever. Like there's some areas of his game that that needs to grow and blossom. And so it kind of he's an interesting guard, but he very easily can kind of like harken you back to some other guards that have played in the league. But a very interesting prospect for sure.
Really interesting. The draft community is interested as well. He has an average stock price of 11.2 on the March draft rankings. Number 11 overall prospect on the draft act. So is that too high, too low, or is it just right?
Sorry, what was the number again, Corey?
11.2 is his average stock price. He was the number 11 overall prospect on the draft act.
I'm totally fine with that. I feel like 11 feels good for him. And there are a lot of different factors, and we're about to do the deep dive on him. But if you kind of even out all the pluses and minuses, like the net outcome being 11 in a very strong class, I can totally see it. I'm totally happy with that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think this is the perfect time to transition into his offense. So where would you like to start? Shooting? First topic on the board, right?
Yeah, totally fine with that.
Okay. So the first thing, though, I do want to highlight just a general principle with him, general thought, is that like he had a 30+% usage.
Yes.
But it didn't really feel like it to me watching him. Very high usage, but like I didn't feel like he was like the super ball dominant, like has to play a heliocentric style. So I guess maybe that would have been a more apt comment to throw in during the creation or finishing or, but I don't know. It was the first thing that I wrote in my notes, but let's start with the shooting. 28.4% on 3.9 3-point attempts per game. Not that good. 7.5 3-point attempts per 100. Just fine. 38% on catch and shoot threes. 37% on unguarded, 39.1% on guarded catch and shoot threes. But here's where, I think things get interesting. 85% from the free throw line on 6.3 free throw attempts per game. So what were your impressions of his jumper?
Well, I mean, really quickly though, that last point you made, Corey. I mean, he's a guy that lived at the line, and obviously we'll get to that with the finishing and stuff like that. But yeah, you and I, we like guys that hit their free throws, and he took a lot of them and made a lot of them. I think that's really, really important, and has always been kind of one of those markers and arrows that kind of points you to what type of shooter, what type of touch that a player is going to have. And Corey, I think we've talked about this, but when Nathan did his our pod just got a million times better. We have our third co-host, Mason, with us, but I want to bring my daughter now. But no, with I think it was Phil Beckner, right? Was the one that Nathan had on the pod, and they were talking about some indicators and how to look at shooting. And I think with Jeremiah, like as you mentioned, some of those numbers, Corey. I mean, his catch and shoot shooting was pretty good, right? For him to be at, let's see, catch and shoot, I think he was at 36%, right? If I'm looking at this right. Yeah. Unguarded 38.5. I like those, right? I like those numbers. I think, and they're pretty good volume on the catch and shoot. Overall, it looks like he was 22 of 61, right? Pretty good, right? But of course, I think the area where he struggled a little bit that I think kind of brought the efficiency down was off the dribble stuff, right? And that's something he's got to work on. I think he's got to continue to improve the off the dribble jumper. But I mean, if we look at just kind of like the baseline stuff, right? Like I like the catch and shoot stuff once again, and the free throw jumper, like that stuff is good. So you're just hoping, okay, more refinement, as we talk about all the time, NBA level coaching, more reps on the higher level. I don't think either one of us are going to come out and say we think that Jeremiah is going to be a really good shooter from day one. This might be a 2 to 3 year project for him to get to, his ultimate apex as a shooter. But I think where he ends up at the end, because I like how the jumper looks, and I like, once again, the fact that he's got good touch, I can see him ending up as an above average shooter for sure. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at, Corey. I feel like right now there is a long road ahead for him to become a very good shooter, but I don't think it's impossible. And there are some good numbers here to back it up, is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. So you mentioned the dribble jumpers. So 32% on dribble jumpers on 128 attempts. So the average, according to my database, for NBA guards in their pre-draft season is 37.4% on dribble jumpers with a standard deviation of 6%. So Fears is a little below average there, but not disastrous. He's not like below the standard deviation. But he is 45.9% on 98 far two attempts per Bart Torvik. The average for NBA guards in their pre-draft season, according to my database, is 39.6% with a standard deviation of around 5 on around 84 attempts. So Fears is above average on those long twos. So it seems like, to me, it is him kind of having to learn how to translate that to distance, because in that mid-range area, free throw line out, he is excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm a buyer. He also took 37 shots with 4 seconds or less on the clock. And he shot 29.7% on those. So I'm pretty optimistic about his shot. I think the form's pretty smooth. I think sometimes he is prone to snake biting on his release and not going through a full follow through. But like every time it left his hand, like even on misses, I was like, oh, that looked good. So I think that there's like a combination of like him taking a lot of off the bounce jumpers, a lot of shots from range in which he hasn't yet figured out, and just some like little technical stuff, maybe some like footwork into his shot. And then like, it's all correctable. And it feels very much me being willing to buy into it in a similar way that I bought into, and you bought into, Tyrese Maxey when he really struggled from distance in his class. I want to say he was somewhere around the same percentage as Fears was. Let's see, we go to the 2020 draft, and Tyrese Maxey, who went 21st. So yeah, Maxey shot 29.2% from three on 3.6 attempts. So a lot of the efficiency and stuff is pretty close to Fears. And because I buy into the aesthetics of it, and maybe the aesthetic bias is like, you shouldn't do that all the time. But like, I bought into Tyrese Maxey's where I was like, all right, just raise his release point, and like, I think it's going to be fine. And he's turned himself into a hell of a player. Now, there's clear differences. Like Tyrese Maxey was very strong, you know, and had like an NBA frame, or at least the semblances of it. Where Fears, I think, is a little more slight.
Yes.
Right? Is that fair to say?
Tough? Yeah.
Very tough. I mean, 6.3 free throws.
Yep.
So yeah, very, very tough kid who's really good downhill, but ultimately I think I believe in the jumper.
Yeah. No, Corey, I completely agree. And I think, you know, it's funny. It's like a full circle moment you bringing up the Tyrese Maxey thing, because I feel like we really bonded over Maxey. I feel like when we first did our pod, right, when you came on as a guest of my old previous pod,
that was the first time we ever spoke.
Yeah, correct. First time we ever talked. And we were both like, yeah, Maxey rocks. And I think that's when we were like, oh, okay, like I think we're kind of on similar wavelengths here. And so Corey, everything that you're saying right now, I agree. I feel very similar about Fears. And to your point, Corey, that you just mentioned at the end, yeah, he doesn't have the same frame that Maxey had even back then as a freshman for Kentucky. But Fears is very, very tough. Very, very tough. And he is a lot tougher than he looks and takes on a ton of contact, absorbs a lot of contact, which is kind of where my brain kind of went with the whole Marbury thing. But anyway, in terms of his shooting though, Corey, I get it. Like, I'm with you. I believe in how it looks. As you mentioned before, he had to put up some grenades. And that will generally hurt your efficiency, especially in the college basketball season, where we're talking about he played 34 games and started 31 of them. He played heavy minutes, right? 30 minutes per game. He took a bunch of shots, right? And like, it's so funny that we're doing this pod right now, Corey, where we're going to juxtapose Fears to Jase Richardson, because they had two very different freshman seasons in terms of like role and context and usage and all that stuff. But just going back to the shooting with Fears, like, once again, like, I can't shake the 85.1% for the free throw line. Like, that's a really, really high percentage. And considering how, like, and of course, like, we get those college guys where it's like, oh, high percentage, low volume, Derek Williams, don't fall for it again. But Jeremiah Fears is like, no, heavy volume. And, you know, the 3-point jumper, like, he took just under 4 a game. And yeah, it was 28.4%. But I like the way that it looks, once again, Corey, and I believe in the touch. And even if we kind of like, you know, go into the finishing later, there's real evidence of that touch. So yeah, I'm a fan. I think he's going to shoot it well. But once again, for me, I think it's going to be a bit of a journey. I don't think it'll be a year one, maybe not even a year two thing in terms of him becoming like an above average shooter. But I mean, once again, this is like the hard part of projecting, right? And looking forward and trying to understand what they might be. For me, if I had to put money on it, I think he becomes an average to an above average shooter. And my thing is, Corey, even if he becomes an average shooter with the type of talent that he has, that's more than good enough for me to get back, you know, top 10 value in this class, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Tankathon's projected NBA 3-point percentage has him at 36%. And if he gets to 36%, like, he's golden.
Good.
Right.
Yep.
You know, because he's taking a lot of tough shots. Hopefully that gets mitigated a little bit by playing with some better players. But like, eventually I think he gets there, because I think there's a lot of evidence, despite some of the negative indicators, to buy into that. Let's talk about his shot creation now. And we can talk about kind of like his ISO bag, his self creation. We could talk about him in the pick and roll, because he does some stuff, man, where you're like, Jesus, like, his handle, he's up there in this class. I mean, he's got to be amongst the top ball handlers in this class, right?
Yep. 100%.
I'm trying to think who's even in his class as ball handler. Like, I actually think Jace is probably up there. I think Jace's handle is pretty tight and pretty creative.
Yep.
But it's kind of a short list. And I mean, Tahad, Boogie Fland, obviously a lot of these smaller guards, but it feels like Jeremiah, like he does stuff. He's got the ball on the string a lot of times, I feel like he's got this ability to bust out a combo move or go between the legs and then change gears so seamlessly, but like really like a bullet just explode in a way that is, until you start watching those patterns over and over, then you go, oh, like, wow, like this is a special trait that he has, that he's able to, all right, between the legs, cross, boom, go. Like shift, quick, deliberate, intentional, impressive.
Yeah, Corey, there's a thing about him. I like the gears point that you made. And I think like in my head, what I was thinking was like he's kind of like a King Cobra was kind of where my brain was at, where he can be a little slithery.
Love that.
And then, when it's time, he's going to come in. I don't know why I had to do the hand thing on a podcast. I apologize. But
and you look like Ben Stiller in Dodgeball.
Vipers. But I was thinking like a King Cobra. Like he can be slithery because he's got great control, great balance, can get low. The thing, Corey, that I love is you mentioned some of these other guards in the class that have like a handle that's on his level. The biggest difference between him and all the guys that you mentioned, he's much taller than them. He's 6'4", right? But he has the same control and the balance and the gears, and like a Cobra, he can be slithery and really like, deliberate about where he's going. And then like when the moment strikes, he can bang, like he's incredible about that. So like, yeah, I kind of do think of him as like a snake, a Cobra type of thing. And I think he's really dangerous, man. Like, as you mentioned, this is earlier in the pod, you use the word violent, Corey. And I think that's a really apt way to describe how he can be as a driver, like the way that he can really get going so quickly, right? Like an electric vehicle, right? That immediate torque that he can get is really special with Jeremiah. And so I think with him, Corey, the one thing I did want to say though, I think sometimes he's so damn fast that sometimes he goes too fast. Which is something that I think he's going to work out and massage out as he continues to develop, because there are some drives where he's just like, he gets going so quickly that like you kind of want him in like a lower gear a little bit just so that he can, have an easier finish at the cup. But no, like what he's going to it's going to translate 100% to the NBA. Like NBA defenders are going to have trouble staying in front of him. I mean, there are going to be a lot of guards that are going to have trouble just staying in front. But I mean, of course, there are guys like Davion Mitchell that can stay in front of him, of course. But no, he's electric, and I cannot wait to see what that looks like as he continues to fill out his frame, which I think he will. I think he's going to get bigger for sure, but he's already got the toughness, right? So imagine like his mind, the aggressive nature of his game. He's a very aggressive player, right? So that aggressive nature plus, him growing out into his, grown man body, and then that electric speed that he has, I think is going to be really, really special. So yeah, I 100% agree, Corey.
Yeah, and you talked about like the electric vehicle, like kind of like shooting out, and like the Cobra, like where he's going like slow to fast, and just like he also has like a very violent like snatchback where he's going very fast and then he goes slow and then he stops. He comes to a complete stop and just hits the brake, and like he's very comfortable getting to that. You mentioned him being slithery. I put get slithery in tight spaces too. Like he'll weave in and out of defenders and like go behind the back through two guys, splitting guys, kind of like for my Mighty Ducks fans out there, Kenny Wu in D2. Yeah, kind of like spinning through the defenders in the Iceland game.
Yeah.
He's pretty adept at doing that. And sometimes he bites off more than he can chew, right? The turnover issue. He was very turnover prone to start the year, and he finished at like 3.4, I believe, is how many turnovers he had. And honestly, I don't even think a lot of his, I mean, yes, sometimes he gets a little loose with his passing, but I felt like a lot of his turnovers too were just like a lack of strength. And like when he'd be trying to do something like that, and somebody would just be like, man, give me that rock. What are you doing? And, but like there are so many instances in which he does it that I'm like, that was a special move, man. Like that was like real deal, special move. And I mean, his ability to just be a consistent paint touch is pretty crazy. Like, you know, we talk about a lot in the draft space, like creating and generating advantages, and he is an advantage creator for sure. And now, you know, it's like he's getting into the paint, he's getting into the rim. We'll talk about his finishing a little bit. This is where there are a little bit of, we have, you know, some issues, right?
Yes.
52.5% at the rim overall, 44.5% in the half court on 119 attempts. So he gets there quite often. He did have 9 dunks on the year, only 1 half court dunk, but he almost had 2. He almost put somebody on it. I forgot who it was.
Yes.
Almost had a violent poster, which would have been like one of the dunks of the year. But he's got no problem getting to the rack. Again, I think a lot of it is strength based in his struggles.
Yes.
Where he can't like always bump somebody off their spot. And so he has a lot of times, despite the fact that he's fast, there's, you know, help defenders waiting and rotating over. And like when he gets those guys like kind of on him, he kind of like struggles to finish through a lot of times that second level. And I also do think there are some touch issues. Like I like his fluidity. I like his comfortability. He uses both hands comfortably. He has these extension finishes, and he has like this flexibility with his body. That's really impressive. But at the same time, you know, I think a lot of times he just misses. Like he doesn't put the ball on the glass in the right spot all the time. So there are touch issues, but I think a lot of it's going to get worked out. I think a lot of the turnovers, a lot of the finishing stuff is going to get worked out when he's stronger.
Corey, God, sorry. I'm like just trying to collect myself. The Kenny Wu Olympic figure skater D2 reference is absolutely sending me. Also, I thought of
Woo, Kenny Wu.
I'm also thinking of the small Chinese guy from Ocean's 11, the trapeze artist guy that they used to be in the bank vault. Just absolutely, you know, 90s, 2000s, they just casted a bunch of small Asian guys. Were like, this is your role. So I love it. But hilarious stuff. But Corey, I think for me with fears, I 100% agree. Right. This is an area of growth for him. We talked about it, right? When we started, we said there are going to be areas of growth for Jeremiah Fears. I believe in his overall touch. I just want to start there. That is my foundation. I believe in his overall touch. I want to go back to what I said before. I think sometimes he's going so fast that I think it messes with him at the rim. Also, as we mentioned, he's a really tough competitor, right? He's strong as hell. He can be really tough. He can absorb contact, finish through. Also, sometimes the guys were just too big for him at times. Like as competitive, as tough, as aggressive as he is, you know, he was, you know, he reclassified, and he was a younger guy, and he was a little bit, as we've mentioned, on the slighter side. I'm not worried about that. Like I really believe, Corey, like everything that you said, I'm right there with you. All of that gets fixed once again with, you know, him growing into his body, NBA coaching, NBA experience, and time. Like I really do. And sometimes, like I get it, that could sound like a cop out. Right? Where it's like, oh, you know, you can say that to anybody. I agree. You can say that to everybody with fears, but for fears specifically, I think because he has those really high end tools that are not given to everybody, as we call them, God-given tools, right? I think he's so special in the areas that he's special that everything else I think can catch up is kind of where my head is at, especially when we're talking about him getting stronger and absorbing contact even better than he already is and learning how to finish. I like the fact that he can finish with either hand and that he's comfortable finishing with either hand. He has no problem going the left hand, no problem going with the right. I do feel like sometimes, though, once again, like on a drive, he can be misdirected by, the strength of his defender, or he gets into the lane and a big giant 7-footer is there with grown man strength because he's 25 years old in college, and it's a little bit harder for him, right? But once Jeremiah Fears is 23, 24, I don't think it's going to be an issue because of the high end skills that he has. And one other thing, Corey, that I had for him was that, like, I do feel like there were opportunities, and I like to see more of this, where he was so set on attacking the rim and being aggressive at the cup that I thought he passed up on some opportunities to pull up, whether it was in the mid range or a floater or like the in between game. I thought sometimes he just kind of passed on it to go all the way to the cup and, either draw a foul or finish at the rim. But I'd like to see that continue to develop too, because I think there's real opportunity there for him to make his life a little bit easier. And for him to actually slow down the game a little bit and find different opportunities for himself and his teammates. And so that's the one thing that I wanted to throw in it also, is that, like, in between game, I like to see him continue to develop.
No, and you know what? I was kind of shocked, especially, based on kind of like the perception of both guys. Like, he shot 50% on runners and floaters. Now it wasn't like he, had attempted 60 of them in the year. I think it was in the 20s, but for somebody who does have touch issues, he was at 50% on those runners and floaters. But I think in that mid-range, you make an important point in how he can take advantage of that. I think one of the areas that he really should look to kind of improve at and look at some of these smaller guards and how they're so effective is playing off 2 feet in that area. He's very much like a 1-foot leaper, which I think at the rim could be fine. Although I think if he learns how to mix up when he's going off 1 or 2, it'll help him be more efficient there too. But like in that mid-range area, especially as such like a quick, violent attacker, watching young Derrick Rose film, because Derrick Rose was super good at being really violently quick and then hitting a jump stop in that mid-range area and getting to a floater. And him being able to play off 2, I think, would also alleviate some of these like turnover issues or inefficiency issues, because he'll get to an area of the floor where, especially because he's so quick, like, guys are going to have to play off of him a little bit, maybe wait, try to meet him at the rim. So there's that little floater area is going to be open for him. So if he kind of comes to jump stops, plays off 2, works in that floater, and then like when guys are on him, now he has decisions. Like, he doesn't have to shoot like if he's going off 1 foot when he's in the air already. Now he can come down. Am I going to shoot? Am I able to pass? Or can I pivot out of this situation? Like Jalen Brunson's really good at that. Getting into that little mid-range area, playing off 2, pivoting away, dipping a shoulder into somebody's body, and then kind of hitting that little mid-range shot too. So that's another thing in that in-between area I think he can get better at, because right now, like, he's a $1 million move, 10-cent finish guy. And I don't know if he's ever going to be a $1 million move, $1 million finish guy, but like, if he can kind of mix it up, get to that mid-range, start playing off 2 more, get to more efficient spots, maybe he's a $1 million move, $500,000 finish, $750,000 finish. But putting himself in different scenarios, it'll make him more devastating, and I think it'll ultimately help him finish better, and also put himself into better positions to make plays for his teammates too when he collapses the defense.
Yeah, which is a beautiful segue into his playmaking, Corey, because I think another area that I liked, but I'd like to see more of, right? I think he's still overall, like, for the season, he 17.3 and 4 assists per game, right? And if you look at the advanced stuff, I think he had a 28.6% assist percentage, pretty good, right? I just think, overall, to your point, Corey, like, there's a maturation period coming, right? That will happen. And because of the tools, once again, he's going to be taken very high in this class. But once again, whatever team takes him is going to put him on a trajectory, a plan, a track for him to figure out, all these little things that he's got to kind of massage out or into his game. And so I think sometimes that's the trouble with what we do, Corey, in like the space that we're in when we talk about the draft world, is that like the projection stuff can be the hardest. But here with Jeremiah, him being as young as he is, but then having the skill set that he has, I'm a big believer. Once again, like my foundation is I believe in the touch, and I believe him getting stronger and improving upon those things. So yeah, Corey, I agree with everything that you said.
Yeah, right. It's easy to write out a scouting report on somebody, right? Like, here's their strengths, here's their weaknesses. The projection part is where the bread is buttered in this realm. As far as the playmaking, I think that he's never going to be this like Trae Young kind of playmaker. I think that that's something that maybe you develop it when you're a lot younger and the ball's in your hand. But so much of it, I feel like, is just like a natural ability to read the game, and you can learn some of it. But there are just things that like Luka and Magic and Trey and all these guys, Steve Nash and Jason Kidd, like there's just a natural ability to that they have. Where I don't know, maybe they just can see the entire floor better because for whatever reason, or maybe they just have this innate sense of where their teammates are, but it's something natural, and I don't think either of these two necessarily have that we're talking about. But because he's a walking paint touch and he's generating these looks, like he has so many opportunities where he's drawing and collapsing 4 or 5 defenders on him in the paint, and he makes like nice kickouts where he can paint the corner. But ultimately, where I came with his playmaking is like it got better. His decision making got better from beginning of the year to the end of the year. I think he is more reactive than manipulative, and I think that's kind of how it's probably going to stick with him. It's going to be a lot more like last second improvisational kind of reads, rather than like premeditated, like, all right, I know when I come off this screen headed to my right that I'm going to be able to shift the defense, and my roller is going to be rolling hard. The tagger is going to come over from the weak side, and I'm going to be able to hit the corner. Maybe he gets there. I don't know if he'll be able to do it consistently, but I think that he will be good enough. And I think where it comes down is like, even though he had such high usage, I really didn't feel like he needed the ball in his hands all the time. And I'm interested to see when he's playing with other great players in the NBA, what it looks like when he doesn't have to kind of make a lot of the decisions, and when his usage might be a little bit lower. Maybe he goes to a place like Brooklyn. Maybe they take a chance on him really early, and like he gets the high usage and he just plays through a ton of mistakes and it looks similar. But I also think there's a world where he ends up in a place where he has to share the ball a little bit more, and it looks different, and that pressure and the extra space will be interesting.
Corey, I think, okay, before when we did our comps, you mentioned a guy, Darius Garland. And I think that's a really interesting one for me because Garland's never been like a super high assist guy, right? But look at his role currently on an excellent Cleveland Cavaliers team, right? They have a 2 small guard lineup, him, Donovan Mitchell. They share the ball handling duties. They share the creation duties. They work very well together. And maybe that's a pathway, a track for Fears to be looking at, right? Where maybe he is a guy that will look really good next to another initiator, right? Like Fears will be able to attack the basket, will give you 20 points a game, but also maybe like, 4 to 6 assists per game, depending on the season, depending on context, right? Maybe that's where he's going to land. And so I think that's a very, very interesting outcome for him. And I like that you mentioned him before because, Garland doesn't have the Luka gene, right? Garland doesn't have the Magic gene, the Larry Bird gene. He doesn't have that, right? But he's still a very effective passer and a guy who can, can run your offense, right? And alongside a guy like Donovan Mitchell because of his outside shooting, right? And what he can do with the ball, he's a very interesting partner. Obviously, Jeremiah doesn't have the shooting aspect yet, but you understand what I mean by the role, right? He could be like a dual initiator type of situation, might be perfect for him one day. So Yeah, Corey, I think I'm right there with you, and I think it's about context, and it's going to be really interesting to see where he ends up.
Yeah, I think that's the issue for most players. If you want to play in the modern NBA, it's really hard to play in a style in which you're going to have the rock all the time. Even you look at Luca, he's playing with LeBron James and Austin Reeves, and they're all sharing ball handling duties. So you have to be adept at playing with multiple guys, whether it's Donovan and Darius, whether it's Shea and Jalen Williams, and their plethora of guards, Casey Wallace and Alex Caruso and whoever else is sharing in the backcourt. So all of these teams, there's multiple creators.
But yeah, no, I definitely agree, Corey. It's gonna be interesting to see, and I think like the last aspect that we can kind of transition to now with Jeremiah before we get into Jace, which I'm most excited about, the defense, right? The defense. I thought on defense, Corey, I thought Jeremiah really showed his age the most on this side of the ball. But I don't mean that to say that it was bad. Like I think I'm by me saying like he showed his age, it can be taken as like a negative connotation. But like there was a bunch of good and bad. I looked at his defense as like a true mixed bag. I thought defensively he had some really nice moments too. Thought he played hard at times, but then also there were times where like he would get demolished on a screen and not really show the desire to get back into the play and contest a shot and stuff like that. Like I didn't love that at times, but also then like the next play he's like in the passing lanes, ripping the ball, going down court for an easy layup. So I think this was a side where I was like, oh, some really high moments, some really low moments. And I think ultimately, if this evens out and he becomes a decent defender, I'd be very happy with that. Was kind of where I landed, Corey. Maybe you saw it differently, but yeah, I was just like, I'm okay with this. Not in love, don't hate it, but showed a lot of his age, and would like to see what this looks like in a couple of years.
Yeah, I don't think that he's ever going to be an impact defender.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think he's going to be bad. I don't know if he's going to be good. I think that on the ball, sometimes he plays off of it a little bit. He gives space. He's not really getting aggressively into somebody's shirt at the point of attack. And then off the ball, I think he's typically like in the right spots, making the right rotations, but like he just doesn't have the physical tools when he is like tagging a roller to really protect the rim or make an effort. Like he's not Derek White and going to come over and like weak side shot block or anything. And then also he's prone to like making young player mistakes. Even though he's in the right spot, he'll get focused on the ball. And like, when he's splitting the difference on the weak side between the wing and the corner, like he'll be in the right spot, but he's ball watching. So he doesn't see his man like cutting baseline, like he'll get himself in some of those spots. So ultimately, I don't think that he's going to provide his value on the defensive end. It's like, can we get this guy to not kill us? And like, I don't think he was killing Oklahoma. The NBA is going to be a different level. Obviously, there's a lot more mismatching going on there and targeting, right? So, maybe that becomes a problem. Most certainly early on. I mean, he's probably going to be terrible. Most rookies are terrible in their rookie year. And with the different rules, the wider court and all of the, shooting, and it's going to be pretty rough. But he, I like that at least he knows where to be. He does get into the passing lanes. He had a 3.1 steal percentage. He rebounds. 13% defensive rebound percentage is pretty good for a guard, so he can grab and go and finish possessions, turn that into offense. So again, I don't think he's going to be an impact guy. Your hope at the next level is that he's just not killing you.
Yep. 100% agree.
Okay, so I think it's time, Albert, that you sell me this pen on Jeremiah Fears.
All right. When it comes to Jeremiah Fears, it comes down to, it's as simple as this. If you're interested in a dynamic guard who can attack the rim and get to the rim with lightning speed, who can finish through contact with finesse, flexibility, developing touch, but also a guy who, can pass the ball a little bit, won't kill you on defense, and is a developing shooter. I think you should be interested in Jeremiah Fears. The biggest sell with him, once again, is electric speed. This isn't like normal speed that you can find at Walmart. This is special. This is some, I don't even know, Neiman Marcus, whatever, high-end elite speed that is hard to find. And so if you're looking for a guard like that, you should grab Jeremiah Fears because he's different. His speed is electric. He's tough. He lives at the free throw line. He's going to make all of his free throws. Eventually, we believe he's going to be an average to an above average shooter. And if you've got that kind of speed and you become an above average to average shooter, that's a very valuable offensive player. And we know NBA teams value offense. So you should be very intrigued and interested in Jeremiah Fears.
Agreed. I think I moved him up a little bit on my board for sure after this deep dive because I think he's got some special tools that are worth gambling on, especially with some of these teams at the draft who are going to be like hunting for potential. Because if he hits, I think there's a real high end outcome for sure. If the shooting doesn't get better, then there might be some low end outcomes too, and maybe he's more of a change of pace bench guard and somebody more like we said, Scottie Pippen Jr. or something. Right. But really talented. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back to talk about Jase Richardson. All right, Albert, we are back, and we are going to talk about Michigan State guard Jase Richardson, freshman, listed at 6'3", 185 pounds on Michigan State's website. He will also be 18.7 years old on draft night. Did you know? He is actually 2 days younger than Jeremiah Fears, who everybody talks about as one of the youngest players in the class, because I didn't realize he was that young.
Me neither.
But 18.7 years on draft night. We say 6'3". There's a lot of chatter. Oh, what's he going to measure at? I know Metcalf went to see him and stood near him. Thinks that he's going to be maybe 6'1", 6'2", whatever, all when it's that close, right? Who could tell by the eye test? But my eye test is saying I think that he's going to have a really plus wingspan. I look at his arms and I go, wow, like he looks like he's going to have some good length. And to me, that might alleviate. I also think he's got like a pretty sturdy frame.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to alleviate some of the size concerns for me.
Oh, this is a hard one, Corey, because like a big part of my eval is just going off a screen, right? I've never seen him in person, but he does look really small to me. But to your point, plus wingspan is always a good thing and always helps to compensate with the smaller size, right? But yeah, he does look small to me. He does look pretty small to me. I do feel like what Metcalf is saying about him being potentially like 6'1", 6'2", like I kind of see that too. But still, hey, don't want to come off as if like I'm out on him. No, it's just a part of his eval that I thought he was pretty small, but we'll see. I don't hate him. I'm excited to talk about him.
Look, it's something you have to talk about. You have to discuss with him. It's, if he was 6'4", then he'd be a top 5 pick, like pretty handedly, right? But he's small. But again, I think he's got a plus wingspan. And now it's just like going into your draft philosophy of what do you believe in as far as what does the modern NBA look like? Because the NBA is shying away from smaller guards, right? But then there are always outliers, and we've always believed in outlier talent here. We were high on a guy like Alperen Şengün. Even though he was funky, he was weird, it didn't look like he was going to fit. Can he place it? He had some outlier talent. So the question becomes, does Jase Richardson have outlier talent as well? And that's what I think we're going to break down right now. So Jace averaged 12.1 points per game. He had 3.3 rebounds per game, 1.9 assists to 0.8 turnovers, 0.3 blocks, 0.8 steals, 49, 41, 84 splits, 62.4% true shooting, 57.4 effective field goal, 11.6 BPM as a freshman. Those are pretty good numbers. Now, I'm going to hit you with another Bartor query. This one has 3 things that I put in. Okay. True shooting greater than 60. BPM greater than 10. Freshmen. Here's the list. Jase Richardson. James Harden. Zion Williamson. Kevin Love. Anthony Davis. Lonzo Ball. Chet Holmgren. Evan Mobley. Joel Embiid. Karl Anthony Towns. Jaren Jackson Jr. Gordon Hayward. Wendell Carter. Cody Zeller. Onyeka Okongwu. Super cool Michael Beasley. And Reed Shepherd.
Wow.
So all
Wow.
NBA players. And Robbie Hummel, who played a couple of seasons and dealt with some injuries. So that's the entire list. That's not a bad list to be on.
Pretty damn good list, actually.
Now, okay, a lot of those names are big men,
Yes.
right? So maybe that's your take, that's a great list to be on if you're a big man. Reed Shepherd's also on that list. Now, we talk about small guards, and I think Jace is kind of the inverse in a lot of ways of Jeremiah Fears, in that he is like an efficiency monster, but there are questions elsewhere. He's lower usage.
Yes.
Right. And that's similar to Reed, another small guard who I think they're probably going to be around the same size, except I think Jace's wingspan is going to measure out better. So you look at Reed's rookie year, and a lot of people will probably be like, oh, he's been terrible. And it certainly hasn't been ideal. But in the games in which he started, he performed really well. He went down to the G League on assignment, and, he got 50 his first time down there. Like, I still think Reed's going to be a really, really good basketball player. And Houston is going to be in a situation where eventually they're not going to be as deep. I think they're going to have to make some kind of consolidation move. Maybe he'll be a part of that. I don't know. Or maybe they kind of realize, like, hey, our offense in the playoffs might suck, and we might need a little bit more shooting on the floor. And maybe he just becomes a bigger part of their offense, if not this year, then next year. But all of those guys on the list, every single one was an NBA player. And I kind of like that. If I'm looking at, the BART queries, if you can find a long list like that of NBA players, like, it's not nothing.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned a lot of bigs, Corey, but also James Harden's also on that list.
Yeah, Lonzo.
Yeah, Lonzo, Reed Shepherd. The Reed Shepherd comp is very interesting. My brain didn't even go there.
I had Reed it too last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I also had Reed, I think top 3, top 4. Anyway, still love him. There's no reason. I mean, Ime is hard on guys, and he's hard on young players, and he has a roster filled with talented guys, and it's hard to find the floor, and he's got Fred VanVleet, and it's hard. I get it. Right. I don't think it's an indictment against Reed Shepherd that he's had the season that he had. Like, that roster it's hard to find the floor. They've got a lot of good players and a lot of young good players. So I don't think, and I also don't feel like Houston's any lower on Reed either. They're probably like, hey, you had a rookie season. And you had a rookie season on a really good NBA team that was the Rockets are the 2nd seed in the West. A really, really good team. So I don't see a problem with Reed at all. And so Jace could be very similar, Corey. damn, my brain was not there for comps. You're gonna love my comp list, or you might hate it, but it's very weird for Jace, because I think Jace is a very weird player. And I think, Corey, to your point before about outliers, right? Like, there were a couple of years ago where, when we started this, I think it was the year that Sharif Cooper was in the draft, and I think you and I had him top 10 on our big boards heading into the draft, and that really hasn't worked out, right? But for us at the time, we thought, his passing ability, his overall game, of course, but the type of creator that he was, I think we both thought he could be an outlier type of guy. And I think the reason why I bring up the Sharif thing is like, yeah, like, the NBA is kind of moving away from the smaller guards, right? But if Jace's outlier ability is going to be shooting efficiency, it might be a very different conversation from a Sharif Cooper, is kind of what I'm trying to say here. And so I'm really not trying, I don't want to bury the lead and kind of just give away kind of where I'm at, but I'm still, even as we're recording this pod, I find myself wavering on how I feel about Jace as a player, because I have him, I feel like, at a decent range on my big board, and like minute by minute I feel like dropping or raising him on my board, because he is such an interesting, difficult eval for me. And Corey, I texted you just as much this week, and I told you, like, I've really struggled with him, but that's why I'm excited to kind of get into the nitty-gritty with you about his game, because I feel like I can go either way still.
All right, so let's get into it. First, I think doing both of these guys are interesting, because Jace came in at his average stock price was 12 on the March draft rankings, which was right below Jeremiah Fears, who was 11.2, and he was the number 12 overall prospect. So they were back to back as far as what their draft stock is. So I think very interesting that we're covering them. Getting into the shooting, there's a lot to like, right? 41.2% on 3.2 3-point attempts per game. Jace was a guy who, was coming off the bench a lot of the season. 7.3 3-pointers per 100. I wish that volume was a little higher. I think this is something that we kind of talked about with Reed as well, as like we wanted the 3-point volume to be higher. He was 44.6% on catch and shoot threes, 39.5% guarded, 50% unguarded on catch and shoot threes per Synergy, 83.6 from the free throw line on 3.4 free throw attempts per game. 39.2% on 74 dribble jumpers, going back to that average that we talked about with Jeremiah. The average for NBA guards in their pre-draft season, according to my database, 37.4%. So Jace is above average there. 40.7% on 91 attempts on far twos per Bartorvik. Average for NBA guards is 39.6, so he is above average there as well on percentage and attempts. He can shoot on the ball. He can shoot off of it. It's hard to see kind of disparaging that skill. I don't know. I think it's fluid. I think it's repeatable. He's got a high-arcing shot. I think it's touch. I think he's a real deal shooter. I just wish the volume was a little bit higher from three, and maybe that's something that an NBA team will talk him into. But I do like that he kind of scores at multiple levels, and he really utilizes the mid-range. Maybe it's not as analytically friendly. Maybe he gets a little more, nuanced in his decisions on when he gets to it and when he doesn't. But, ultimately, I kind of like the shot diet. And I don't know. I think the shooting's really, really good, man.
I agree with you, Corey. I will never let go of my lefty bias. Love him. Sorry, I'm trying to process my thoughts, because this, once again, so I'm with you. I like the jumper. I like it a lot.
I want your unfiltered thoughts on it, because it seems like you're a little more hesitant on the shooting than I am.
No. I like the shooting. Sorry. It's not even about the shooting. It's just the whole macro aspect of Jace that I'm still struggling with. Sorry. I like the shooting a lot, and this is the part that gets me like really interested in him, is that I really like the shooting. Hold on. I just want to look. So like, even like per 100 possessions, right? 7.3 attempts, 41%. I like that. Per 40 minutes, 5 attempts, 41%, right? Like, I just think, the percentages don't change. But I just feel like overall, Like, I feel like, to your point, Corey, more volume would help. But then also, the context that he was in for Michigan State, like, didn't really allow that, right? And not just the shooting aspect, but a lot of aspects of his offensive game, which we're going to get into. It's just, and like, also going back to the size thing with him, it's like we have a lot of really effective small guards too in the league. I think he can find a way. So anyway, sorry, my mind is all over the place. But in terms of the shooting, I like it a lot, Corey. I think overall, not just the shooting, but the handle, like his overall offensive game with the ball in his hands, he's incredibly balanced, which is something I love about him. He is an incredibly balanced offensive player, low center of gravity, really great about staying balanced on his jumper, off the dribble, off the catch, off motion. He does a really good job of finding that nice solid core foundation to get a shot off of a nice base. And so I like that a lot about Richardson. So sorry, Corey, I don't have questions about his shooting. I like it a lot. And I think with more volume, it's still going to look good. So yes, I'm a believer in the shot, believer in the efficiency, and a believer in the efficiency even with more volume.
Okay. Yeah. I can't wait to see where your real questions are with him. Because, man, a lot of his analytical profiles is pretty strong, but certainly he does have those questions. Now, transitioning into kind of his creation ability, and you mentioned, like, even with his shooting, how he creates to get into a shot, super balanced, right? I think that's the thing. It seems like he's always on balance, even when he gets himself into a situation where he's like, finally gets up in the air and then he finishes and he ends up on the ground after getting contact. One of the things with Jeremiah is, like, I felt like he was on the ground all the time, like whether he was getting bumped off his path or at the rim. And I feel like Jace is just really good at kind of, like you said, staying solid and just being balanced and never getting himself off kilter. With the deep dive, I was really impressed with his handle. Like, I always knew he had a good handle. I always knew he had some really good moves. It's a lot more nuanced than I remembered it being just when, I was like watching the games live and not like super high focusing specifically on the scout as much as we do on a deep dive. I think he uses his length well because he gets, his handle, it's quick, tight, like his crossovers, he gets low to the ground. I think it's really fluid where he goes in from a combo move into his jumper and like super smooth movement patterns. Like where Fears, I think, had a lot of smooth moments, like weaving through traffic where he's slithery. It was like very herky jerky and violent. Whereas like, I still think there's some herky jerky in Jace, but there's just a smoothness to him that I think is different than what Jeremiah has. Not saying that one is better than the other. But I really liked his smoothness. I think he creates a lot of space. I think he's really comfortable. He's really good at getting into step backs, using that handle. Then when we talk about like kind of him creating in the pick and roll, he's really good at setups, like really crafty. He rocks a defender one way. He'll use like a jab step or an in and out just to get them leaning. And then when he'll like cross back, now they're like a little off balance. They're like, they need to like move a little quicker. And now he's like bringing them into the screen. It's really crafty. I really like it. I think he's really natural at like snaking ball screens and playing into space. And my favorite thing about him is his ability to play into space. He's good in tight spaces too. He knows how to work there. He's got like this crazy, like, up and under and, like mid-air flexibility, and like he uses extension. But like when he is trying to create an opportunity, whether it's with a screen, whatever, he knows where the open space is. So instead of trying to play through tight spaces, and that's where a lot of mistakes get made, instead he'll just be like, oh, the open space is over there, so that's where I'm going. And it might be off a snake. It might just be like him coming a little wider off a screen, which typically I don't like. And I think sometimes he can, but maybe sometimes he does it too much. But really, really good at just playing into space so he gets shots that are comfortable for him. And that's why I think he looks so smooth and he's so anti-mistake prone, because he's putting himself in positions to where he's not going to have to be, making like dastardly turnovers. And I think like some of his passing is, can be safe, but I think sometimes his passing could be a little flashy too. More safe than flashy, but he showed some flashes there. We'll talk about that. But I don't know. I love how he plays in space. I love his setups. I love his creation ability. I love his handle. I love how like it's just very smooth. I love him in DHOs off the screens, like because now like get downhill and he'll, I think he's good at playing off too. Although the floaters I think are a little. I was expecting the percentage to be a little higher on floaters, like. He was, let's see, what did I have him on? Runners, floaters, 35% on runners and floaters. Eye test wise, I would have thought that was better. But like he can get downhill off those DHOs, or he'll punish you with a shot if you cheat under. But yeah, I don't know. I really like him as a creator for himself. As a shot creator, I think he's very good. And I had some moments where I was like, wow, that was tough. That was tough.
Yeah, Corey, I think for me, I think this is the part where like I'm challenging myself, right? Where I'm thinking, okay, what aspect of what I'm seeing, or like what am I not seeing, am I holding against him too much? I hope that makes sense. So like I think what he was able to do in a small sample size is good. And I think that's where I need to focus, where like I think sometimes like I focus too much on the small sample size aspect of it, and then like I question myself and I'm like, oh, like it's in a vacuum, it's a not in a vacuum, but it's in a small sample size, like how much of this is translatable, blah blah blah. I want to kind of get into what you said, Corey. I agree. I think he's really crafty, but also can be explosive in tight spaces. I really like how he can get through those tight spaces with good balance, with quickness. There are possessions where he's getting downhill in a hurry, and he's getting down there. He's finishing through contact. I don't think he's a plus athlete, but I think he's a good athlete.
Yeah,
which is important because good genes, right? His dad was an excellent athlete, right? So he's definitely got good athleticism to him. I especially loved him in DHOs, Corey. I thought those DHO situations, he was either getting in a wide open, clean look, right, coming tight off of the screen, or he was getting downhill and just wreaking havoc, right? To your point about what he can do, right? So I like that a lot. And so, Corey, it
I
sounds
just
like I'm
quickly on the athleticism.
yeah.
He's not. I mean, he's got some bounce, and that shows up on I think
Some,
sometimes
yeah.
on the defensive side where he's like coming in for a block or something.
Mhm.
He's very agile.
Mhm.
Very agile. So I think that is a form of like athleticism that maybe it's not the run and jump, but like his agility, I think is really impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it sounds like I'm like trying to get to a but it's not even like I'm building up to a but right now. It's once again like I'm processing while we're having this conversation.
Small
Because
volume. You have the small volume thing in your head.
yes, I had some small volume things in my head, and I cannot lie to you, Corey. My name isn't Maxwell, but I do have some small guard bias, right? And that's something
Also
that
fair.
Right, that it's something that I need to continue to work out. But the thing is, like, I also don't want to put him in a box either and just be like, he's a small guard and small guards are X, because that's not how life works, right?
Right.
Just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I need to be Kenny Wu or the Chinese trapeze guy from Ocean's 11. I'm a taller Asian guy. I'm different, right? So I don't want to put people in boxes, right? So with Jace, that's like what I'm trying to shake, right? Like Get rid of that, Albert. Like, get rid of the small sample size stuff. Trust your eyes. Trust your gut. My eyes and my gut tell me he's a good player. He's a very good player, and I like him a lot. It's just I'm so worried. I think I'm snake bitten a little bit with the whole small guard thing, and my mind goes back to a Sharif Cooper and like wondering, like, shit, does this work? Right? Does the small guard work in the NBA? But then,
But
also,
if Sharif shot it,
exactly,
it might have worked.
Also, I'm a lifelong Knick fan who lives and dies with every Knick outcome. And if you watch the Knicks in game 2, all we did was ride Jalen Brunson. That led to a loss,
Yeah.
but Jalen Brunson is awesome. And I love that man. And he's probably smaller than Jace, if not, or same height. I don't know. Right. And so why is it that I give my life to my fandom as a Knick fan and love my captain, Jalen Brunson, but I can't see the vision with Jace? Because look, Jace, for our listeners out there, I'm not saying Jace is going to be Jalen Brunson, but Jalen Brunson is a very, very small guard, but he's got outlier abilities, right? His footwork is almost bar none, right? Like, his footwork's excellent. The balance is excellent. The touch is excellent. The competitive spirit, excellent. The coaching, right? All that stuff, excellent. Jace has a lot of that stuff. Jace has the balance. He's got the outside jumper. At the same age, Jace is probably a better, I would say, is a better shooter than Jalen Brunson was at the same age, right? He's got real outlier abilities to him, right? The things that he can do, as we mentioned, coming off of screens, DHOs, all that stuff. He's got a lot. So, Corey, I'm sorry I went on this long monologue, but this is, once again, my brain just trying to process all this. I think I'm leaning more towards loving the guy and really challenging myself and trying to get rid of all the small guard bias and small sample size bias is what I'm trying to say. So,
well, you can't just. I don't think disregarding it is smart either, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of smart small guards in this class that are good, that we like, and they're not all going to work out. Tahad Pettiford's probably my favorite player in the class. There's a chance, maybe even a good chance, that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
He's 5'11". Like he's explosive and he's shifty and he's tough and all that. It might not work. Or he might be Isaiah Thomas because he finds the right situation. Jalen Brunson, who knows if he doesn't go to the Knicks, does another team put him in position to be the man? Situation in the NBA plays a major, major, major role in decisions. So there might be a world where Jalen Brunson is just like a six man, and then that's not a data point that we point to be like, look how great this guy is. Peyton Pritchard is a clear starter level player. He just won sixth man of the year. He might be a starter if he goes to his next team who gives him a ton of usage, and he looks like a different player. The league is about opportunity and fit and situation. So I think with Jace, it's smart to think of that, and will that happen for him? Because you do have to consider that. And it wasn't a, smaller sample size just because, he played 25 minutes per game. He only started 15 games.
Right.
But I think that, when you're looking at kind of his development through the course of the season, I think there's enough to kind of buy into in that 25 minutes. It wasn't 17 minutes. 25 is still a good portion of the game, I think. So, but I totally get your concerns, because as much as I sing in his praises, there's a real shot that he's just too small. When we talk to the defense, maybe there's some current concerns there. Now, kind of transitioning into the finishing, where maybe you start to see concerns for a lot of small guards. We talked about the percentages for Jeremiah. I touched on Tahad Pettiford a few minutes ago. Tahad Pettiford, another guy, small guard, who struggled at the rim. Jace was 68.8% at the rim overall. He was 63.8% in half court attempts on 58 attempts. He had 5 dunks, 1 half court dunk. So he was awesome as a finisher too. Now, he might not have been self-generating as many looks at the rim, but there's some real touch there. And, I know we have Chow Fair, I trying to say it in the comments. keep saying like, talk about his lack of an offhand, and yes, he lefty like most lefties, pretty left hand dominant, but he gets to the rack, he finishes 70%. Like he's finishing like a big man when he's there, despite his size, despite his height, and it's not like he's not getting there ever. Like he's still getting to the rim, he's still finishing on good volume. So, I mean, again, I think in midair, he contorts his body. He's got flexibility. He has hang time. He has touch. He's not going to play like his dad above the rim and just yam everything. That's clearly something that we've seen with him on the film, but he's just got great touch. And even if his rim pressure, he had 93 total attempts. So yeah, like not there all the time. He's not living at the rim, but I think he's got a pretty good mix at all three levels. And clearly, like let's say his efficiency drops a little bit because he's trying to get to the rim more. He's still going to be, if he's still in that 60+% area, that's still pretty dang good. So it's statistically, he's got a strong case where it's like, it's hard to find a ton of flaws in his game. Right. And like, I think we agree you have to marry the eye test with the analytics, but to me, it's like, it looks good on film too. So, for me, it's just watching him. I'm very impressed. And he does have flaws. And part of it is like, he's got some things in his game that he doesn't do, and maybe it's not going to affect him analytically all the time because he's not doing it, and it's not a positive or a negative. It's just a hole. And, we'll talk about some stuff on the defensive end that I thought, was concerning, but offensively, like, I like that he's going to cut. I like that he's good at moving into space, even if that means he's relocating for a shot. He's a smart, heady player with good feel. He knows when to get to the rim. He knows when to pull up in the mid-range. He knows when to shoot an outside jumper. He seems like a guy who had an NBA dad.
Yeah. Really strong basketball IQ, plus feel. Corey, everything that you said about his movement on the court is really important to mention about him, because there is no diva aspect when it comes to his evaluation. He's a guy that is an absolute team player. Will move for his teammates, will relocate for his teammates. As you mentioned, there are times he'll move into space for a jumper, but also I believe he's doing it for his teammates. He's moving, he's staying active, he's keeping the ball moving. As a passer, right? He may never be this incredible passer that's going to be, averaging, 7, 8, 9 assists per game, but love how he moves the ball with energy as well. Right. Obviously, I'm kind of jumping into playmaking, but I kind of want to combine the two. But at the rim stuff, Corey, I don't really have much else to add to what you said. Like, I think there's real craft. I love the point you made about the flexibility. There's some really impressive body contortion things that he does at the rim, but also him not being like an elite athlete, him still being a plus athlete helps him at his size, with his length, with his touch. He had some really nice finishes in the SEC tournament. Or not the SEC tournament. Sorry, I'm thinking about Jeremiah Fears. But in conference play, and also I just feel like with him, there were a couple times where he would go to the rim, and it felt like he had like a second burst after contact, where he would kind of just battle through and have like this extra jump after. I don't even know how to describe that and what that's even called. Correct. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say. But anyway, yes, I know. Sorry, I was confused by something. But overall, I like it all. As you mentioned, Corey, the statistics / eye test stuff with him, I get it. So yeah, I like it. I like the finishing. He definitely is left-hand dominant, though. I'll give Kaio Chow. I'm sorry, I'm failing at pronouncing his name. Oh, Kaio. Okay, Kaio. Kyle, your point about him being left-hand dominant, that was like the first thing I had in my notes. Like he definitely is, but it's very common for lefties. As to Corey's point, like it happens a lot with lefties. Lefties like going left because it makes them weird and funky, and it's effective for them. So I totally understand that too. But just overall, like the type of stuff that he can do, and with the numbers backing it up, I think he's a very, very strong finisher. So yes, Corey.
All right, let's move on to his playmaking. So not super high playmaking numbers, 14.4% assist percentage to only a 7.9 turnover. Now, he wasn't the primary creator from on his team. He wasn't having the offense run through him, as we talked about with the usage. I think that a lot of the assist percentage being a little lower is that, one, I think he's score first. I think he has a score first mentality, even though he's high feel and he's not going to like dribble the air out of the ball. Like he'll move off of it, but he's not necessarily like thinking the game like a point guard all the time. And he in high school, he played with Caden Boozer. So like, he's been playing off the ball a lot. He is, I think, a good connective passer. And I do think he makes good reads with the ball in his hands sometimes. And I wonder what that looks like if he had more reps and like his job was to be a creator. I think he's really good hitting cutters in stride when he collapsed the defense. So I think he's smart. He's cognizant. He recognizes. I think he's a really good jump passer. Some jump passers get in trouble when they leave their feet. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He had like a couple of sick reads. One, he like toyed with Danny Wolf in drop against Michigan, collapsed all 5 defenders, and then threw like a wicked jump pass to the weak side wing for a 3. He had another one against Purdue, right baseline, where he came out and then like went across his chest, almost like a backhand in tennis. I know you're big into tennis right now. So almost like a backhand, threw the ball cross court, and I don't think he got the assist on that one. Where I think, and those are like reads where you're like, all right, so he's seeing some of this stuff. He knows that those reads are open. None of it was consistent enough that you were like, all right, well, because he seems like the type of player to me, like where we talk about his plus feel and all this, where I'd be like, all right, well, he should be recognizing all of that stuff where shifting the defense and being premeditated. I didn't see that often, where it's like, all right, I'm going to take those dribble to the left. I'm a lefty. So they're, everybody knows I'm going left. They're going to load up. And now because they loaded up, I'm going to sling it to the weak side of the court off a live dribble, or even off a, one of a 2-hand overhead skip or whatever. I didn't see a ton of that. And I didn't see it consistently. And maybe because he didn't get to spam, possession after possession as the ball handler with the low usage, but I don't know if it's in his DNA. I also don't know if a team gives him more reps, if the playmaking starts to pop more at the next level. I didn't go back and rewatch his high school film. Like, maybe that'll answer some questions. Maybe he shows more of that there. But overall, he doesn't make a ton of mistakes. A lot of his passes are pretty simple, but sometimes he throws in some flair and some creativity that makes me a little more interested in what he might be able to do, even if I wouldn't bet on him being some like just give him the ball time after time after time after time and he's going to pick defenses apart kind of guy.
Yeah. All right, Corey. So for me with him, I think there are a couple of factors that we need to kind of put into the equation. I think to your point, and you mentioned this earlier, he only started 15 games out of 36. So he started less than half the games, right? 25.3 minutes per game, being an 18-year-old freshman, right? I think that's part of the context that is important for us to highlight. Like, by nature, he's a score first guy. Cool. Not only is he by nature a score first guy, but then if he's also playing limited minutes and he's a freshman at his age, in the minutes that he has, he probably wants to do what he's good at, right? Which is a very normal human instinct, right? And so I think I'm okay with that, right? Like limited minutes, once again, not tiny, but still limited, right? I still feel like whenever he touched the floor, he probably just wanted to show what he can do, right? But still with good feel and basketball IQ, I'm with you, Corey. I think he's a good passer. So when I say good passer, I said this before. I think he moves the ball with energy, right? He when the ball is thrown to the weak side and they're passing it along. I think he does a good job of that. As we say all the time, connective passing. I think he's good at that. I think we should the way that we're looking at Jace right now, in terms of his like ultimate passing ability, I think we should leave that as a question mark because of what you said in terms of context and situation that he was in, and we just didn't see enough. Or if he was playing the type of minutes that Jeremiah was, and was given the role that Jeremiah was given, I think we could come to a very different place in terms of our conclusion on Jace as a passer, as a primary passer, as a guy who can really like create for his teammates. I just don't know. And I feel better just kind of leaving that as a question mark. And I'd rather just say, I think he's a good connective passer. I think he can make the one more pass. I think he can swing the ball. I think he does. Once again, he moves the ball with energy. I think these are good things, right? I'd like to highlight the good, and for the things where we're not so sure of because we didn't see a lot of because of all the different reasons that we've listed, I'd like to just leave that as a question mark. I think that's where I feel safest in terms of making my final like judgments on him as a prospect is I'm not sure. And I'd like to see more. And I think depending on context and where he ends up, we will find our answer on that. Is kind of where I feel, is what I feel right now.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. All right, let's transition over to the defensive side of the ball, which probably won't be that long. 1.9% steal percentage, 1.4 block percentage, 11.4% defensive rebound percentage, which is pretty good for a small guard. It's around the same defensive rebounding percentage as Asa Newell. So on the ball, he sits in a stance, he slides well, I think, uses his length well on contests, which, again, if you're going to be smaller, I think he's really good at those extension contests. I like he positions himself to shade the offensive player to their weak hand. But he did get kind of game plan for a few times and get exploited in the post. I think Bryant in their game in I guess that was the first round of the tournament. They did that a couple of times, kind of just picking on him. So there's where our size concerns come, right? Like where guys are going to be able to kind of play some bully ball on him. As strong as he is, as low as his center of gravity can get with his, he's just 6'1". Even if he comes to be 6'3" with shoes, he's small on the court. And defensively, this is where I think it's really going to matter the most, because I think offensively, on the ball, off the ball, wherever you put him, he's going to fit into any lineup. Spoiler alert, I think he ended up in Orlando on our mock draft that is coming out tomorrow if you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter. And if you're listening to this in the podcast feed, it should be out as you're listening to this. So I think that's a really good spot for him. And maybe he needs to go to a place like that where they have a lot of like size to kind of mitigate some of the defensive concerns. But there are defensive concerns as far as how he can be kind of mismatched. And, in those playoff situations, and a lot of what we're seeing now in the NBA playoffs, even in that one game playoff situation, there were some teams who were like, all right, when he's on the floor, maybe we can go at him and bully him a little bit.
Yeah, Corey, I think this is the thing. I think this is the part of his eval that kind of comes baked in. Like, we don't really need to tell our listeners out there that, some teams are going to game plan against him. It's just the reality. Yeah, he's listed at 6'3". He's probably not. NBA teams have eyes. If they see a guy that's much smaller on the court, they're going to try to exploit that. Like, once again, as a Knicks fan, this is something I see all the time. They try to exploit Jalen Brunson on the defensive side of the ball. NBA teams tried to do that to Steph Curry his whole career. Steph Curry has put up an incredible fight to prevent that, right? So with Jace, like, this is a part of the eval, and it's baked in. We already knew. And I'm sure for our people who are tuning in, I'm sure you didn't expect to listen to our pod tonight thinking we're going to tell you that Jace is some stalwart on the defensive side of the ball. He's just not, right? And NBA teams, when they draft a guy like Jace, they're not drafting him to be a defensive stopper. They're drafting him because of what he offers on the offensive side of the ball. And in terms of what he offers on defense, you're going to game plan around that. NBA teams are used to this, right? There are a lot of small guards in the NBA that NBA teams kind of have to hide and kind of cover for. And it is what it is. And so, Corey, like, my ultimate point to Jace is that, like, I think that's going to happen. I think NBA teams, like, when he touches the floor, especially in his rookie season, they are going to hunt him dirty. Like, NBA coaches are going to be like, he's on the floor, go at him every single time. Put a bigger guy on him, put any guard on him, anybody, and just, shoot over the top and do whatever. Like, of course, that's a part of the plan, but of course, also NBA teams, on the other hand of it, will figure out ways to cover for him and hide him and protect him and continue to work with him and have him develop. So I don't want to add much more than that, Corey, because I think our listeners knew that was coming and knew that this was part of his eval, and how he adapts to that, learns to survive in that, and how NBA coaches set him up to be successful, even with those flaws, I think is what we'll see later on. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, 100%. It's the inevitable. Any small guard, that's going to be the question mark. Off the ball, I think he has some moments. He's active hands in the passing lanes. I think he's got some really impressive blocks.
Yes, he does.
Like, he has some, like, whoa, he got up. He swatted that with ferocity. He's slithery, chasing around screens. I think his closeouts can be pretty sloppy. And, like, guys will take him off the dribble, like, on some of these closeouts. But ultimately, I think, maybe that stuff, you can coach that stuff out.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's going to be the question mark, and how successful he is in the league with the kind of role that he gets. A lot of it might have to do with how well he holds up defensively. So, that's a wait and see. All right, let's close this thing out. I want you to sell me this pen on Jace Richardson.
We didn't get to do comps, but I will.
Right. Okay. Go for it.
Okay,
if you were
sorry.
buying stock in this player, who may you have bought stock in previously?
I'm sorry. I really wanted to do this part because I came up with, like, the weirdest group for him. That kind of shows you where my brain was at. Here we go. So I'm thinking, like, low, medium, high, but with, like, a mix of stuff. God, people are going to hate this. I thought of a guy like Nate Robinson. Was one guy I had in my mind. Of course, like, Nate Robinson, elite athlete, but you get what I'm saying. Smaller guard, offensive dynamo. He's going to come in and give you good minutes off the bench. My, like, elite outcome for him, Corey, was, like, what if he's like a Mike Conley type of guy?
I have Mike Conley.
Yeah, like, what if he becomes that? Obviously, he doesn't have Mike Conley's offhand finishing. But yeah, I put that up there. This is like elite top outcome for him, Mike Conley. A couple names, a guy that you mentioned before, Isaiah Thomas, was on my list, right? Boston, Isaiah Thomas. And then, like, some weirdos on my list. People won't like this one. Roger Mason Jr. was a guy that came to mind. Smaller guard, but a guy who played in the league a long time as an outside shooter, was valuable to teams. And then a guy like Mo Williams, right? I thought of, like, what if he becomes a Mo Williams guy, an all-star, right? A guy who was a very effective offensive player, was the biggest guy, right? He figured out how to survive and work and play with a LeBron James and have a successful career, and was always a very good offensive player. So, like, obviously my lowest end is Roger Mason Jr. and Nate Robinson, but, like, my medium to high is Mo Williams, Isaiah Thomas, Mike Conley was kind of where my brain was at. Hope that makes sense.
I had Conley. I think there might be a Fred VanVleet type outcome. Even Peyton Pritchard, like, if he finds himself on a great team coming off the bench and just filling it up, and making smart decisions. And you look at a guy like, oh, maybe him in a bigger role, right? Like, I think that all fair comp. So, all right, let's close it out. Sell me this pen on Jase Richardson.
All right. When it comes to Jase Richardson, his game isn't, it's complicated, but also it's pretty simple. He's a very dynamic and versatile offensive player. He's proven, obviously, in his freshman year at Michigan, that he can be a very effective off-ball player. He moves well. He finds open spaces on the court, high feel, really smart guy, moves the ball well, but also he's going to knock down shots. He's a 3-level scorer. He can shoot and score from the mid-range with good touch. And then obviously at the rim, We think he's a very effective, strong finisher, and the numbers back that as well. Defensively, obviously, he has his questions. He's small. Teams will game plan around that. But overall, you're not drafting Jace Richardson to be an elite defender and spearheading your defense. You're grabbing him to offer a different wrinkle to your offense, bringing him in to be an offensive dynamo that can offer a different type of scoring that maybe you don't have and that you're looking for. So in my opinion, I'm thinking like lottery, late lottery, teens, early 20s, no problem. If you're a team that's looking for an offensive guy who can come in and, turn the game for you even at times, I think Jace Richardson is a very interesting prospect.
All right, I'm sold. Yeah, I'm gonna buy in on him. I'm buying in on both of these guys after this strong deep dive. So I really liked these guys' film. I enjoyed watching it. Two guys who have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. Appreciate everybody watching live. If you haven't yet, make sure that you like and subscribe on YouTube. So the button somewhere, there's get my finger on camera down there. Hit that like button, share, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching and rocking with us all year long. We have a ton of great stuff, planned for the rest of the year. Some really fun stuff Albert and I have planned in a couple of weeks that we're excited about. So film sessions are going to be coming back with players. So a lot of good stuff. Make sure that you head to NoCeilingsNBA.com, follow us there. Subscribe to No Ceilings Plus if you can. We got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe there, and we've had a lot of great stuff from covering Portsmouth and Hoop Summit. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming. So NoCeilingsNBA.com, subscribe, get stuff delivered directly to your inbox for free every morning, and then we have our Plus stuff, like I said, where you get bonus coverage. And you can follow me at Corey Tullaba on Twitter, NBA Draft Dude elsewhere. You could follow Albert at Alberto Gim. That's Alberto, like the toe on your foot. See, been listening to the show. GTG NBA elsewhere as well. So we will be back again next week with a fun episode on two prospects that we haven't figured out who we're covering yet, but we'll be here for you guys. So appreciate you guys for rocking. And until next time, we are out. Peace.